The universe was having a really bad Tuesday. Not your regular, oh no, I spilled quantum coffee on my hyperdrive kind of bad. This was the sort of catastrophic failure that made supernovas look like birthday candles. The kind of disaster that had the Galactic Council sweating through their various excretory pores. And trust me, some species had a lot of those. Station Nexus 9 was dying. And when I say dying, I mean it was making noises that sounded like a blender trying to process a piano while someone played dubstep on a kazoo. The station, a marvel of engineering that looked like someone had asked a drunk spider to design a snowflake out of chrome and regret, controlled the dimensional gateways for 47 star systems. Without it, the galactic economy would collapse faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. On Jupiter. What do you mean, it's unfixable? Ambassador Krex Theta's 17 eye stalks were all pointed at different engineers, creating the universe's most terrifying disco ball effect. The Valdorian was having what humans would later describe as a complete and utter meltdown, though in his species case this was unfortunately literal. His crystalline skin was actually starting to puddle. Chief Engineer Klopnar adjusted his breathing apparatus, which made a sound like someone stepping on a bagpipe filled with pudding. The quantum resonance matrix has achieved a state of, how do I put this delicately, complete chaos. The probability engines are calculating that 2 plus 2 equals purple, the gravity generators think they're toasters, and the main computer just asked me about my feelings. The assembled council members, a collection of beings so diverse it looked like someone had raided the universe's junk drawer, all began talking at once. The resulting cacophony sounded like a symphony orchestra falling down an infinite staircase while arguing about tax reform. Perhaps, wheezed Sublord Yixmal through his probability gills, we could reverse the polarity? We tried that! Klopnar's tentacles flailed in exasperation. The station reversed US. I spent 3 hours existing backwards. Do you know how embarrassing it is to uneat breakfast? The Nexus 9 chose that moment to demonstrate its dysfunction by turning all the corridor lights into a pulsing rainbow while playing what sounded suspiciously like Never Gonna Give You Up through the emergency klaxons. The station had apparently developed a sense of humor, a terrible, terrible sense of humor. Ambassador Zephi of the Quantum Collective, essentially a sentient math equation wearing a bow tie, flickered into existence looking constipated, which for a being made of pure energy was quite an achievement. The hegemony's best engineers have calculated a 0.000. He continued adding zeros for an uncomfortable 30 seconds, 3% chance of successful repair using conventional methods. What about unconventional methods? Asked someone from the back. Those odds are somehow worse. The math actually started crying. It was then that Junior Secretary Plim, being so low on the bureaucratic totem pole that he technically didn't exist on weekends, raised what might have been a hand, or possibly a sandwich. With Plim, you could never really tell. What about the humans? The silence that followed was so complete that you could hear a photon drop, which coincidentally one did, making a tiny plink sound that somehow made everything worse. The humans? Krexatheta's eye stalks all swiveled to focus on Plim like 17 judgmental periscopes. The species that sent a car into space for no reason? The ones who invented deep-fried butter? The beings who looked at splitting atoms and thought, yeah, let's make this a weapon and a power source? Those humans? Well, Plim shuffled what were probably his feet. They did fix that thing. Everyone knew what that thing was. Nobody wanted to talk about that thing, the Proxima incident, where humans had solved a dimensional rift by, and this was the part that made physicists weep, throwing a microwave oven into it while it was running. With a fork inside, the rift had not only closed, but had apologized on the way out. Their solutions don't make sense, protested Chief Science Officer Wixney, whose species prided themselves on logic so pure it could be used as a cleaning product. They violate causality, they insult mathematics, they make physics cry in the corner. But they work, Plim insisted, somehow managing to stand his ground, despite not being entirely sure he had ground to stand on. The station chose that moment to hiccup. When a space station the size of Manhattan hiccups, things get weird. Gravity reversed in Section 7. The cafeteria started serving food from next Thursday, and everyone's universal translators briefly turned all speech into haikus. "Fine!" Crex Theta screamed in perfect 5-7-5-syllable format. "Call the humans now! This can't get much worse, can it? Oh wait, yes it can!" The formal request was drafted with all the pomp and circumstance the Galactic Council could muster. It was written in 17 languages, encoded in quantum particles, blessed by 3 different religious organizations, and countersigned by beings from dimensions that technically didn't exist yet. It requested Earth's finest engineers, specialists in quantum mechanics, experts in dimensional theory, and masters of advanced mathematics. What happened next would go down in history as the greatest failure of intergalactic communication since someone accidentally declared war on a black hole. The message traveled through 17 different bureaucratic departments on its way to Earth. Each department, naturally, had to add their own stamp of approval. The Department of Redundancy Department added their stamp twice. The Committee for Simplification added a 40-page appendix. The Bureau of Clarity made everything slightly more confusing. By the time it passed through the Translator Guild, who were having their annual Interpret Everything Literally Day, the message had transformed somewhat. It went through the subspace communications array, bounced off 3 satellites, got temporarily stuck in a spam filter, was forwarded to the wrong department twice, and finally landed on the desk of Gerald Fitzgerald, night shift supervisor at the International Space Communications Bureau in Houston, Texas. Gerald, who was 6 hours into a 12-hour shift and running entirely on gas station coffee and spite, squinted at the message through glasses held together with duct tape and hope. Urgent request. Technical specialists. Fix broken thing. Large payment. He rubbed his eyes, tried to make sense of the alien technical specifications that had somehow been translated into what looked like IKEA instructions written by someone having an existential crisis, and made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. "Technical specialists who fix things, huh?" Gerald muttered, pulling up his contact list. His cousin Randy had been pestering him about finding work for his buddies ever since that incident with the oil rig. The one everyone agreed never to talk about. The one that somehow ended with the rig working better than ever, despite being held together with baling wire and what Randy called aggressive encouragement. Gerald dialed the number for Randy's repair and restoration. "If we can't fix it, it ain't broke yet." Randy Buckwheat answered on the 7th ring, which was pretty good considering it was 3 a.m. and the phone was probably under a pile of engine parts. "Yellow, this better be good, Gerald. I was having a beautiful dream about a carburetor." "Randy, how'd you and the boys like to make some serious money fixing something unusual?" "How unusual we talking? Like that time with Mrs. Henderson's washing machine that was possessed? Or more like when Billy Joe accidentally made that lawnmower achieve sentience?" Gerald looked at the incomprehensible alien specifications again. One diagram appeared to show a cube that existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously. Another seemed to be instructions for turning entropy backwards. A third was just a picture of what looked like a very confused octopus. "Let's go with more." "Hot damn! Me and the boys will be right over. Let me just grab Billy Joe and Cletus. Big Mike's already here. He's been sleeping in the shop ever since his wife found out about the thing with the refrigerator." "What thing with the refrigerator?" "You don't want to know, but on the bright side, it now makes ice cubes that exist in the past, present, and future simultaneously. Makes for some interesting margaritas." An hour later, Randy and his crew stood in Gerald's office, looking at the actual official intergalactic request for aid. The crew was exactly what you'd expect if you ordered American Mechanics from a catalogue that had been translated through 17 languages and back. Randy Buckwheat himself stood 6'4" in his least favorite pair of boots, wearing coveralls that had seen more oil than Saudi Arabia. His baseball cap advertised a beer company that had gone out of business during the Carter administration, and his mustache looked like it had its own zip code. Billy Joe Clampett was shorter, wider, and somehow gave the impression of being perfectly spherical, despite clearly not being so. His claim to fame was once fixing a nuclear submarine with a butter knife and some chewing gum. The Navy still wouldn't talk about it, but the submarine had never worked better. Cletus Washington, and yes, he knew his name sounded like a contradiction, was the kind of skinny that made you wonder if he was actually three-dimensional. He could fit into engine spaces that shouldn't exist and had an uncanny ability to diagnose problems by smell alone. That there's a burnt bearing, he'd say, or someone put sugar in the quantum stabilizer. He was always right. And then there was Big Mike Kowalski. Nobody knew his actual first name because nobody had ever been brave enough to ask. Big Mike was the kind of large that made physics nervous. He had once lifted an engine block, not because he needed to, but because it was in the way of his sandwich. His approach to mechanical problems was simple. If hitting it didn't fix it, you weren't hitting it right. So, Randy said, squinting at the alien schematics that looked like someone had asked M.C. Escher to design a headache, they want us to fix a space station. A space station that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously and controls the portal network for 47 star systems, Gerald clarified. Does it use metric or standard? What? Measurements. Metric or standard? 'Cause I ain't bringing both sets of wrenches to space. Do you know how much extra that weighs? Gerald stared at Randy for a long moment. It uses quantum measurements based on the oscillation frequency of dark matter particles. So metric. Got it. Before Gerald could explain that wasn't even remotely what he meant, Cletus had pulled out a flashlight and was examining one of the holographic displays showing the station's structure. Well, there's your problem right there, Cletus announced, pointing at something that looked like a Klein bottle having an argument with a Mobius strip. Someone cross-threaded the dimensional stabilizers. You can tell by the way the space-time around it looks all constipated. Constipated space-time? Gerald asked weakly. Sure. See how it's all bunched up there? That's textbook constipation. Probably needs a good flush of the primary systems, maybe some percussive maintenance on the auxiliary couplings. Big Mike cracked his knuckles, which sounded like someone breaking concrete blocks with a sledgehammer. Percussive maintenance, my specialty. Now hold on, Gerald said, suddenly realizing what he might have unleashed upon the galaxy. This is advanced alien technology we're talking about. You can't just hit it with a wrench. Randy pulled out a wrench that looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star and then used to beat other wrenches to death. It had Problem Solver engraved on the handle, though the S had worn off, so it now read Problem Olver. This ain't just any wrench, cousin. This here's Big Bertha. She's fixed everything from combine harvesters to nuclear reactors. One time, Billy Joe used her to fix a smartphone. How do you fix a smartphone with a wrench that size? Carefully, Billy Joe said with a grin that suggested it hadn't been careful at all. The next morning, the crew stood in front of the ship that would take them to Nexus 9. The Galactic Council had sent their finest diplomatic vessel, a sleek, chrome masterpiece that looked like what would happen if a swan made love to a mathematics equation, and their baby was raised by fiber optic cables. The alien pilot, a being named Vexlaw, who looked like a praying mantis, had dressed up as a lamp for Halloween, watched in horror as the humans began loading their equipment. What? What is that? Vexlaw pointed a trembling appendage at the rust-covered truck Big Mike was pushing up the ramp. That's Bessie, Randy said proudly. Finest 1987 Ford F-150 ever to roll off the assembly line. She's got over 500,000 miles on her original engine and only caught fire twice this year. You're bringing a combustion vehicle onto my ship? Well, how else are we supposed to haul our equipment around? Your fancy station got a Home Depot. Didn't think so. The truck was followed by several tons of earth equipment that looked like it had been salvaged from a museum dedicated to the concept of rust. There were toolboxes held together with duct tape, welding equipment that predated several wars, and enough WD-40 to drown a small planet. Is that a chainsaw? Vexela's voice had reached a pitch that only dogs and certain types of quantum particles could hear. 3 of them, Billy Joe said cheerfully. Never know when you might need to cut through something, or intimidate it. Chainsaws are very versatile. The journey to Nexus 9 took 12 hours through hyperspace, which Randy described as like riding a roller coaster designed by someone who hates you, through a tunnel made of disco lights and regret. The humans spent most of it playing poker using nuts and bolts as chips, while their alien escort tried very hard not to think about what they'd gotten themselves into. When they finally arrived at Nexus 9, the situation had gotten worse. The station now looked like a chrome snowflake having a seizure in a blender. Parts of it were phasing in and out of reality. The docking bay kept changing locations, and the welcome message was playing backwards in a language that didn't exist. Finally, Ambassador Crexus Theta rushed forward as the humans disembarked, his 17 eye stalks making him look like an overly enthusiastic bouquet. "Are you the engineering team from Earth?" Randy looked at his crew, shrugged, and said, "Sure, let's go with that. Randy Buckwheat, fixing things since 1987. This here's my crew. Where's the patient?" "Patient? The broke thing what needs fixing." Crextheta led them through corridors that couldn't decide what color they wanted to be, past doorways that occasionally led to Last Tuesday, and around a corner that somehow had 5 sides. The main control room looked like someone had asked a supercomputer to have a nervous breakdown and then display it as modern art. Screens showed error messages in languages that were being invented on the spot. Consoles sparked with colors that didn't exist in normal space, and in the center of it all, the main quantum core was making a sound like a cat trying to yodel while gargling marbles. The assembled alien engineers, representing the finest minds from 17 different species, looked like they'd been through a blender made of calculus and despair. Chief Engineer Klopnar's tentacles were tied in knots that defied topology, and his assistant had apparently given up and was lying on the floor, occasionally whimpering about imaginary numbers becoming real. "We've tried everything," Klopnar wailed. "We've recalibrated the quantum matrices 17 times. We've reversed the polarity of the neutron flow. We've even tried turning it off and on again, but the off switch has developed opinions and won't cooperate." Randy walked up to the main console, which was displaying what looked like the universe's angriest error message. He studied it for a moment, then pulled out a pair of reading glasses held together with electrical tape and a paperclip. "Billy Joe? What's that smell like to you?" Billy Joe took a deep sniff near the console, his face scrunching up in concentration. "Burnt capacitor, maybe some fried relays, and—" He took another sniff. "Is that vanilla?" "Vanilla?" Klopnar's translator glitched. "Why would you smell vanilla?" "Means something's overheating," Cletus explained, already pulling panels off the wall with casual disregard for the warning dimensional hazard signs. "Probably your coolant system's backing up. See, when certain types of quantum coolant overheat, they break down into compounds that smell like vanilla, basic chemistry." "That's not basic chemistry. That's not even advanced chemistry. That's Tuesday chemistry," Big Mike rumbled, hefting his toolbox, which made a sound like someone had filled a coffin with cowbells. "Happens all the time back home." The aliens watched in horror as the humans began their work. Where the Galactic Council's engineers had approached the problem with delicate instruments and careful calculations, the Earth crew treated it like they were fixing a particularly stubborn tractor. Randy crawled under a console that was actively sparking with electricity that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. "Hand me that wrench, Billy Joe." "No, the bigger one." "No, bigger. The one we ain't supposed to use 'cause it violates the Geneva Convention." I thought that was for war crimes, Billy Joe said, passing over a wrench that looked like it could be used to threaten God. Anything's a war crime if you're creative enough. Cletus, stop licking that panel. I'm testing the electrical frequency, Cletus protested, his tongue slightly blue from whatever he'd been licking. With your tongue? Fastest way to tell if it's AC or DC. AC tingles, DC bites. That's not how electricity works, Wixney protested, his logical mind fracturing like a dropped phone screen. It is if you're brave enough, Cletus responded, going back to licking various components while making thoughtful noises. Meanwhile, Big Mike had found the section where the gravity generators were convinced they were toasters. The massive machines, each the size of a small building, were humming erratically and occasionally producing what looked like cosmic breadcrumbs. Big Mike studied them for a moment, then wound up and kicked one so hard that it actually shifted several inches across the floor, leaving grooves in the reinforced steel. The machine made a sound like boong-eng-eng-eng-eng and suddenly snapped back to normal operation. "What did you do?" Klopner screamed, his tentacles forming shapes that geometry hadn't authorized. "Percussive maintenance," Big Mike said simply, winding up to kick the next one. "Sometimes machines get confused. A good kick reminds them what they're supposed to be doing. That's not science. That's barely even violence. That's effective?" Big Mike suggested, as the second generator also resumed normal operation after receiving what he called a love tap. In the quantum core room, things were getting even weirder. Randy had discovered that the probability engines, massive crystalline structures that calculated potential futures, had somehow achieved what he called a state of teenage rebellion. "See, your problem is you're treating them like machines," Randy explained to the increasingly horrified alien engineers. "But anything smart enough to calculate probability is smart enough to get bored. And when smart things get bored, they start acting up." "The probability engines are not sentient," Zephy protested, his bow tie spinning in indignation. "Course they are. Look at this." Randy pointed to a readout that was supposed to show quantum probability calculations, but was instead displaying what looked like doodles. "This here's a drawing of a cat. This one's playing tic-tac-toe with itself. And this one? Is that a rude gesture?" Indeed, one of the probability engines was displaying what was universally recognized across all species as a gesture of displeasure. "So, what do we do?" Krextheta asked, his eye stalks drooping in defeat. Randy pulled out a can of WD-40 that looked like it had survived several apocalypses and started spraying it liberally on the probability engines. "Same thing you do with any teenager. Give 'em something to do." He then pulled out what appeared to be a rubber duck, wearing a tiny cowboy hat, and placed it on top of the main console. "What is that?" Klopner asked, afraid of the answer. "That's Senor Quackers. He's our supervisor. See, machines work better when they think someone's watching them. Don't ask me why, but having a rubber duck improves efficiency by about 30%. That makes no sense. Neither does quantum physics, but you all seem fine with that." Billy Joe had meanwhile discovered the section where the main computer had gained sentience and was apparently having an existential crisis. The massive AI, which controlled most of the station's functions, was displaying messages like, "What is my purpose?" and "Do androids dream of electric sheep?" and "Why is there something rather than nothing?" "Oh, that's easy," Billy Joe said, pulling out what looked like a smartphone that had been through a wood chipper and somehow still worked. "It's got too much RAM and not enough to do. It's overthinking." He plugged his phone into the quantum computer through a connection that shouldn't have been possible. The port sizes weren't even from the same dimension, and started downloading something. "What are you installing?" Wixney asked, morbid curiosity overcoming logical terror. "Candy Crush. Also Angry Birds, some YouTube videos of cats, and the entire first season of The Real Housewives of Atlanta. That ought to keep it busy enough to stop thinking about the meaning of life." "You're giving our quantum computer reality television?" Trust me, nothing stops existential dread faster than watching other people's manufactured drama. Sure enough, the computer's displays shifted from philosophical queries to level 347 completed, and these birds seem unnecessarily angry. Dudity. But the real challenge came when they reached the dimensional stabilizer matrix, the heart of the station that kept it existing in the correct number of dimensions at any given time. It was currently experiencing what Cletus described as dimensional constipation, causing parts of the station to exist in anywhere from 2 to 17 dimensions simultaneously. The chamber housing the matrix was a nightmare of non-Euclidean geometry. Stairs led up to floors that were somehow below them. Doors opened onto themselves. One corner of the room had apparently decided to be a sphere. "Nope," said one of the junior alien engineers, and promptly fainted. "How do we even approach this?" Krexatheta asked, his eye stalks trying to look in directions that didn't exist. Randy studied the situation, rubbing his mustache thoughtfully. Then he reached into his toolbox and pulled out something that made every scientist in the room simultaneously gasp and whimper. It was a roll of duct tape. But not just any duct tape. This was the most ancient, powerful roll of duct tape any of them had ever seen. It seemed to absorb light. It radiated an aura of pure, concentrated, fixing energy. This was duct tape that had seen things, fixed things, possibly held together things that should never have been held together. "Billy Joe, Cletus, you know what to do." Indeed, the three humans began moving through the impossible space with the confidence of people who had once fixed a barn that had been turned inside out by a tornado. They ignored the laws of physics with such casual disdain that the laws of physics began to feel self-conscious. Cletus started by climbing a wall that was technically the ceiling from another angle, placing strips of duct tape on seemingly random spots. See, the problem with dimensional rifts is they're like tears in fabric. You just gotta patch 'em up. "You can't patch dimensions with tape," Klopner screamed. "Can't never could do nothing," Cletus replied, continuing to apply duct tape to surfaces that existed in different time zones. Billy Joe had found what he described as the source of the smell, a section where dimensions were overlapping so badly that you could see last week, next month, and an alternate Tuesday where everyone was slightly more purple. "Big Mike," he called. "Need you to hold this dimension steady while I tape it." Big Mike reached into what looked like empty air, grabbed something that made everyone's eyes water to look at, and held it steady through sheer force of will and bicep. "How are you holding a dimension?" Wixney had progressed from horror to a kind of fascinated madness. "Same way you hold anything else," Big Mike grunted. "Firm grip, steady pressure, and confidence. Dimensions are like wild animals. They can sense fear." Meanwhile, Randy had approached the central matrix itself, a crystalline structure that existed in so many dimensions simultaneously that it looked like a migraine having an anxiety attack. He studied it for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a can of beer that had definitely not been there a second ago. "What are you doing?" Krexatheta asked weakly. "Gonna give it some beer." "What?" "Look, anything complex enough to control dimensions is complex enough to be stressed, and nothing calms stress like a cold one." He poured the beer directly onto the crystalline matrix. The reaction was immediate and impossible. The matrix absorbed the beer through dimensions that didn't technically exist, and somehow made a satisfied sighing sound. The chaotic flashing of colors began to slow. The impossible angle started looking merely improbable. The sphere that had been a corner decided to be a corner again, though it kept the sphere as a souvenir in a pocket dimension. It's working!" Klopnar's tentacles untied themselves in shock. "But how?" "Easy," Randy said, applying some WD-40 to joints that existed in theoretical space. "Your problem is you're thinking about this like it's complicated. But at the end of the day, whether it's a tractor or a dimensional matrix, machines all want the same thing: a little attention, some lubrication, and occasionally a swift kick to remind them who's boss. To demonstrate, he kicked a panel that was flickering between existing and not existing. It decided existing was easier and stabilized. Also, Cletus added, having successfully duct-taped several dimensions back together, y'all were overthinking it. You had your quantum resonance at 47. 3 terahertz, when any fool could see it wanted to be at 47.5. How could you possibly know that? It was vibrating funny, you can tell by the sound. Here, listen. He thumped a panel, producing a sound that should not have been audible to human ears. Hear that? That's a quarter hertz flat. Basic stuff. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the humans continued their work. Every solution was wrong. Every method was impossible. Every fix violated at least 3 laws of physics, and probably several laws of actual governments. And yet, it was working. The probability engines, distracted by mobile games and reality TV, had stopped their rebellious calculations and were working normally. If you considered occasionally pausing to watch cat videos normal. The gravity generators, thoroughly intimidated by Big Mike's aggressive negotiation tactics, were no longer identifying as kitchen appliances. The main computer had stopped having existential crises and was instead fully invested in getting 3 stars on every Candy Crush level. And the dimensional matrix, held together with duct tape, WD-40, and what Randy insisted was good vibes, was humming along smoothly. But the real test came when they reached the station's power core, a contained black hole that provided energy for the entire station. It had somehow developed what could only be described as hiccups. Each hiccup sent waves of gravity randomly through the station, making everyone briefly weigh either nothing or approximately as much as a small moon. "Oh, that's just gas," Billy Joe diagnosed after watching it for a minute. "Black holes don't get gas," Zeffy protested, his bow tie now spinning fast enough to achieve liftoff. "Sure they do. See how it's pulsing irregularly? Classic indigestion. Probably been feeding it the wrong kind of matter. What you been putting in there? Precisely calculated amounts of compressed hydrogen, and there's your problem. Too rich. Black holes are like old dogs. You gotta give 'em simple food or they get gassy." Billy Joe pulled out what looked like a bag of concrete mix from the truck. "This here's limestone. Nice, simple calcium carbonate. It'll settle its stomach right down." Before anyone could stop him, he started pouring limestone into the black hole feed system. The black hole burped once, a sound that somehow managed to be both impossibly deep and embarrassingly human, then settled into a smooth, contented purr. "That's impossible." Wixney had given up on logic and was now apparently trying to divide by 0 out of spite. "Black holes don't have stomachs. They don't get indigestion. They don't burp." "This one just did," Cletus pointed out helpfully. "Maybe your science ain't as complete as you thought." It was at this moment that the station did something unprecedented in the history of galactic engineering. It started working better than it had before breaking. The dimensional gateways, now held together with duct tape and goodwill, were operating at a 140% efficiency. Ships were arriving at their destinations before they'd technically left. The Galactic Council received a complaint from next Thursday about noise from a party that hadn't happened yet. The power output from the no longer gassy black hole had increased by 30%. The gravity generators were not only working, but had somehow developed a sense of humor, occasionally making people's left shoes slightly heavier than their right ones. The probability engines, when not playing mobile games, were calculating futures with an accuracy that was frankly disturbing. They'd predicted 17 different ambassadors' lunch orders, 6 divorces, and 1 unexpected romance between a Valdorian crystal being and a sentient gas cloud named Kevin. "This doesn't make sense," Klopner said for approximately the 400th time. "Nothing about this makes sense. You violated every law of physics we know." Well, there's your problem right there, Randy said, wiping his hands on a rag that was more oil than fabric. You're following laws. We're more like guidelines kind of people. Guidelines? Sure. Physics is like a speed limit sign. It's a suggestion, really. You can follow it if you want, but sometimes you gotta go a little faster to pass a truck, you know? That's not how reality works. Says who? Physics. Well, physics ain't here right now, is it? Just us and a space station that's working better than ever. It was then that the station's AI, now fully invested in its mobile games, made an announcement. Attention all personnel. I have reached level 2008-47 in Candy Crush. Also, the station is operating at peak efficiency. These two facts may be related. That is all. Psi, does anyone have lives to send me? Ambassador Krexatheta's 17 eye stalks all pointed in different directions, a clear sign of a Valdorian nervous breakdown. But we called for Earth's finest engineers, their best and brightest, their most educated experts. Gerald, who had been brought along to observe and was currently trying very hard not to laugh, cleared his throat. Actually, there might have been a slight miscommunication in the requisition process. Miscommunication. Well, you asked for technical specialists who could fix things. Randy and his crew are technically specialists, and they do fix things. These are not engineers. These are rednecks, Randy supplied helpfully. Best damn rednecks in 3 counties. 4, if you count that incident in Jefferson County, but the statute of limitations ain't run out on that yet. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for black holes or particularly awkward family dinners. Finally, Sublord Yixmal spoke up, his probability gills fluttering with something that might have been amusement. You're telling me that 4 humans with no formal education in quantum mechanics just fixed a station that the greatest minds in the galaxy couldn't repair? Hey now, Billy Joe protested. I'll have you know I got my GED eventually, on the 3rd try. The test was on a Monday, and Mondays ain't my strong suit. And, Cletus added, I took a correspondence course in small engine repair. Got a certificate and everything. It's hanging in my bathroom. Why your bathroom? Asked Wixney, who had given up on sanity and was now just along for the ride. Best lighting for reading. You'd be surprised how much learning you can do in there. Big Mike just shrugged, making his coveralls ripple like a tectonic event. I learned by doing, mostly doing things wrong until they worked right. The Galactic Council looked at each other, then at the humans, then at their beautifully functioning station that was now somehow operating on principles that didn't exist in any textbook. How much do we owe you? Krexatheta asked weakly. Randy did some calculations on his hand with a pencil he pulled from behind his ear. Well, let's see. Standard rate is $60 an hour, but this is a rush job, and it's definitely outside our usual service area. Plus there's the space travel surcharge, exotic materials handling fee, and Big Mike had to miss his bowling league. He scribbled some more numbers, carried the 2, forgot what he was carrying, started over, then finally announced, $47,000, and a case of beer, good beer, none of that light stuff. $47,000? Krexatheta's translator hiccuped. For fixing a multi-dimensional space station that controls galactic commerce. And the beer, Randy reminded him. That's important. We were prepared to pay 17 billion credits. Well, shoot. Why didn't you say so? Billy Joe, we should have broken more stuff first. I can break something now if you want, Big Mike offered, already eyeing a particularly expensive-looking console. No! Screamed every alien in unison. The station chose that moment to make an announcement. Attention! I have achieved self-actualization through mobile gaming. I now understand my purpose, to facilitate transportation and get 3 stars on every Angry Birds level. Also, Tuesday is now purple. That is all. Why is Tuesday purple? Klopnar asked, having entirely given up on understanding anything. Probably the duct tape, Cletus mused. Sometimes when you tape dimensions together, you get some color bleed. It'll sort itself out in a week or 2. Worst case, Wednesday might turn a little mauve. The Galactic Council paid the humans their $47,000. Earth currency had to be specially replicated, plus the beer, which required a separate diplomatic mission to determine what constituted good beer, and provided them with honorary titles that roughly translated to those who fix things in ways that should not work but do. As the humans were preparing to leave, loading their rust-covered truck back onto the diplomatic vessel, Chief Engineer Kulopnar couldn't help but ask one final question. How? How did you know what to do? Our computers, our simulations, our models, they all said it was impossible. Randy paused in loading a toolbox that contained at least 3 items that violated the Geneva Convention and 2 that violated the laws of thermodynamics. Well, there's your problem. You're asking computers what's possible. We just figure out what needs doing and then do it. Possibility's got nothing to do with it. But the science is like a manual for your car, Billy Joe interrupted. It's helpful and all, but when you're broke down on the side of the road at 2 a.m., you don't need a manual. You need someone who ain't afraid to get their hands dirty and try something stupid. Besides, Cletus added, securing the chainsaw collection that had terrified 3 different species, y'all were treating this station like it was special, but broken is broken, whether it's a quantum matrix or a carburetor. The trick is not being scared of it. Big Mike summed it up in his own way. Hit it hard enough, it'll work. As their ship departed, the station hummed along perfectly, held together by duct tape, WD-40, and a complete disregard for the fundamental laws of reality. The probability engines continued to play Candy Crush between calculations. The black hole occasionally burped contentedly, and somewhere in the dimensional matrix, Tuesday remained steadfastly purple. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council received an urgent message from the hegemony. Their planet-sized computer network had achieved sentience and was demanding to know the meaning of life. Ambassador Crexus Theta didn't hesitate. Get me those humans, the ones with the truck. The Rednecks, sir. Is that what they're called? Yes, them. And tell them to bring more of that duct tape. The grey kind that fixes everything. But, sir, surely our scientists... Crex Theta's 17 eye stalks all focused on the junior officer with laser intensity. Our scientists just spent 6 months trying to fix a hiccuping black hole. The humans fixed it with limestone. Call them. Yes, sir. Should I mention payment? Whatever they want. Just maybe negotiate on the beer this time. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Randy's phone rang at 2 a.m. He looked at the caller ID, a number that technically didn't exist in this dimension, and grinned. "Boys," he hollered to his crew, who were in the shop trying to figure out why a lawnmower had started predicting the weather. "Pack your tools. We got another job." "Space job?" Billy Joe asked hopefully. "Yep, yeehaw. Cletus, grab the good duct tape." "Which one?" "All of it." And so it came to pass that 4 rednecks from Earth became the galaxy's most sought-after repair crew, fixing impossible problems with impossible solutions, armed with nothing but basic tools, duct tape, and a cheerful disregard for the laws of physics. The Valdorian Science Academy spent the next 50 years trying to understand how duct tape could hold dimensions together. They failed, obviously, because they were overthinking it. Sometimes the universe just needs someone brave enough to slap some tape on it and call it fixed. The station, meanwhile, continued to work perfectly. Oh, sure, Tuesday stayed purple, and occasionally the gravity would hiccup just for fun, and the AI had developed an addiction to mobile gaming that was slightly concerning. But it worked, and in the end, that's all that mattered. Though the philosophers would debate it for centuries, the real lesson was simple. The universe, for all its complexity and mystery, could be fixed with the right attitude, the right tools, and enough WD-40. You just had to be too stubborn to know it was impossible. The aliens never did figure out what the rubber duck was for. Senior Quackers knew, but he wasn't talking. 6 months passed, and the galaxy had reluctantly accepted a new reality. When things broke in ways that shouldn't be possible, you called the humans. Not the educated ones with their degrees and their theories. You called Randy and his crew. The Crystalline Collective's temporal engines were stuck in next Thursday. Randy fixed them by pouring coffee into the chronometer. It just needed to wake up, he'd explained to the horrified temporal physicists. The Zephron Empire's planetary defense grid achieved sentience and depression simultaneously. Billy Joe introduced it to online shopping. Nothing cures existential dread like free 2-day shipping, he'd said, while the planet's AI happily browsed for throw pillows. The Quantum Federation's new wormhole generator only produced worms. Cletus diagnosed it as a spelling error in reality and fixed it with what he called aggressive punctuation, which involved hitting specific spots with a hammer while yelling grammatical corrections. Each job ended the same way. The aliens paid, the humans left, and the scientists spent months trying to understand what had just happened. Papers were written, theories were proposed. Several academics had nervous breakdowns and took up simpler professions like quantum juggling or black hole dentistry. But the real change came when the news reached the Infinite Archive, a massive space station that contained the collective knowledge of 10,000 civilizations. It was essentially the galaxy's Wikipedia, if Wikipedia was the size of Jupiter and could think for itself. The archive had a problem. A big problem. It had accumulated so much information that it had started forming its own black holes of pure data. Knowledge was literally collapsing in on itself, creating information singularities that were deleting entire civilizations from history. The Council of Librarians, being so intelligent they existed partially in theoretical space, had tried everything. They'd run countless simulations, applied every theory, consulted every expert. The conclusion was unanimous. The archive would collapse within a week, taking with it the entire recorded history of the galaxy. "Call the humans," the head librarian said, a being made entirely of organized light who communicated in bibliographic citations. "The scholars from Earth's universities?" his assistant asked hopefully. "No, the other ones. The Rednecks?" "Yes, but this is the Infinite Archive. It contains knowledge from before some species developed consciousness. It has books that exist in 17 dimensions. It has the complete works of Shakespeare as performed by quarks. And it's broken. Call them." Randy arrived with his crew and their truck, which had somehow gotten rustier despite existing in the vacuum of space. They stood in the archive's main hall, a space so vast it had its own weather system, surrounded by floating books, scrolling data streams, and at least one librarian who appeared to be having a panic attack in binary. "So," Randy said, looking at the swirling vortexes of collapsing information that were slowly devouring centuries of knowledge, "you got yourself a clog." "A clog?" The head librarian's light flickered in indignation. "This is an information cascade leading to epistemological collapse." "Nah, it's a clog. See, you got too much information trying to go through too small a pipe, like when Billy Joe tried to flush that whole turkey down his toilet." "It was an experiment," Billy Joe protested. "It was Thanksgiving and you were drunk." "Those ain't mutually exclusive." Cletus was already examining one of the data streams with technology that consisted of a magnifying glass and intuition. "Your problem is you're treating information like it's special. But information's just stuff, and stuff follows rules. You got too much stuff in one place, it's gonna back up. But this is knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of—" "Stuff," Big Mike interrupted, poking at a floating equation that was apparently the mathematical proof for love. It squeaked. Randy pulled out what looked like a plunger that had been modified with parts from at least 3 different centuries. "Billy Joe, you remember what we did with Mrs. Patterson's septic tank? The thing with the dynamite? No, the other thing. Oh, the reverse flow trick. That's the one. Cletus, we're gonna need the big pump. The one we're not supposed to have. That's the one." What followed was perhaps the most horrifying display of problem-solving the galaxy had ever witnessed. The humans treated the sum total of galactic knowledge like a backed-up sewage system. They installed what they called knowledge baffles, which were essentially cookie sheets duct-taped to dimensional walls. They rerouted data streams through something called a hillbilly filter, a coffee maker filled with steel wool. They even used actual dynamite, though Randy assured everyone it was therapeutic dynamite for the archive's mental health. Udi! The librarians watched in horror as Big Mike simply grabbed a collapsing information singularity, a thing that shouldn't be grabbable, and held it while Randy sprayed it with WD-40. "How are you holding pure information?" "Same way you hold anything," Big Mike replied. "Just gotta want it bad enough." The real breakthrough came when Billy Joe discovered that the archive's organizational system was, in his words, constipated with its own smartness. "Bussy, you're organizing everything perfectly. Alphabetical, chronological, dimensional, by species, by subject. You got so many organization systems they're fighting each other. It's like having 17 people trying to drive the same car." "So what do you suggest?" the head librarian asked weakly. "Chaos." "Chaos?" "Controlled chaos. See, if everything's perfectly organized, there's no wiggle room, no flexibility. You need what we call strategic messiness. And like my workshop, looks like a tornado hit it, but I can find any tool in 3 seconds flat." They proceeded to introduce what they called the Dewey Decimal Chaotic System. Instead of organizing books perfectly, they organized them good enough. Instead of precise categorization, they used what Cletus called intuitive placement, putting things where they felt right rather than where they logically should go. "This is madness," one librarian protested, watching Billy Joe shelve a cookbook on quantum physics next to a romance novel about sentient gases. "No," Randy corrected. "Madness would be letting your whole archive collapse because you're too proud to get a little messy. This is problem solving." They installed what they called a knowledge overflow valve, essentially a hole they cut in reality with a chainsaw, leading to what Randy described as somewhere that don't mind extra information. Where does it go? Best not to ask. Plausible deniability and all that. When Big Mike suggested they reboot the archive, everyone assumed it was a metaphor. It wasn't. He found the archive's main power coupling, a stream of pure energy that had been running since before some galaxies were born, and simply unplugged it. The silence was deafening. Every light went out. Every data stream stopped. 10,000 civilizations worth of knowledge simply stopped. The librarians didn't scream, only because they were too horrified to remember how. Big Mike counted to 30. "Gotta give it time to forget what it was doing wrong," and plugged it back in. The archive rebooted with a sound like the universe clearing its throat. Lights flickered back on. Data streams resumed flowing. But now they flowed differently, not in perfect organized channels, but in a sort of controlled chaos that somehow made more sense. The information singularities were gone. The data black holes had evaporated. Knowledge flowed freely, organized just enough to be findable, but not so much that it strangled itself. "It's working?" The head librarian's voice was barely a whisper. "Course it is," Randy said, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "You just had to stop thinking of it as special. Archive, computer, septic tank, they're all just systems. And every system needs a little chaos to keep it honest." The archive's AI, which had been silent throughout the ordeal, suddenly spoke. "System reboot complete. Operational efficiency at calculating. Who cares? It works. New files detected. Humanity, subcategory, redneck engineering. Warning, contents violate several laws of physics. Filing under things that shouldn't work, but do." As they were leaving, the head librarian couldn't help but ask, "Why does chaos work better than order?" Cletus thought about it for a moment. "You ever try to hold water?" "Water? Yeah. You squeeze it tight, try to control it, and it shoots out between your fingers, but cup your hands loose, give it room to move, and it stays right where you want it. That's Actually profound. Nah, that's just something my grandma used to say. Of course, she was usually talking about catching chickens, but the principle's the same. The payment this time was substantial, enough to buy a small planet. Randy negotiated it down to a reasonable amount, plus a lifetime supply of beef jerky and fishing licenses for a dimension where the fish existed in probability space. You could have been rich beyond measure, the head librarian said. What would we do with a planet? Can't fix a carburetor on a planet. Well, not easily anyway. As their ship departed, the archive hummed with its new chaotic organization. Books filed themselves wherever felt right. Data streams meandered like lazy rivers instead of rushing like highways. The AI had discovered knock-knock jokes and wouldn't stop telling them. It was imperfect. It was messy. It was slightly insane. It was also working better than it ever had. Back on Earth, Randy got a call from his cousin Gerald. "Randy, what the hell did you boys do? I've got 17 different alien civilizations asking for your contact information. The Quantum Pope wants to hire you to fix a holy relic. The Void Collective needs help with their existential crisis, and something called the Entropy Guild wants to know if you can make chaos more chaotic. Tell them we're booked through Thursday." After that, Randy looked at his crew. Billy Joe was trying to teach a toaster to play poker. Cletus was licking a battery to see if it was charged. Big Mike was bench-pressing an engine block because it was there. After that, we'll see what needs fixing. The universe had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the best solution to a complex problem isn't more complexity. It's 4 guys with tools, duct tape, and a cheerful disregard for what's supposed to be impossible. Physics textbooks across the galaxy were quietly updated with a new chapter, When All Else Fails, the Human Approach. It consisted mainly of warnings and the phone number for Randy's shop. The motto of the Rednecks Space Repair Service became legend. We might not know what we're doing, but we'll get it done anyway. And somewhere in the infinite archive, filed between impossible things and insane solutions, was a new entry. Redneck Engineering, the galaxy's most terrifying miracle. The final note in the file was written by the archive's AI. They fixed me with a plunger and enthusiasm. I should be offended. Instead, I feel strangely proud. Also, Tuesday is still purple. Nobody knows why. Nobody wants to ask. But the universe wasn't done testing the limits of human, unconventional wisdom. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, which Randy knew meant it was serious. Aliens had terrible timing, but they usually at least waited until business hours. This was different. "Mr. Randy?" The voice on the other end sounded like someone gargling harmonicas while crying. "This is Supreme Chancellor Vox Heed of the Galactic Council. We have a code black situation." "What's that mean in American?" "It means we're all going to die unless you help us." Randy sat up, accidentally knocking over a beer can that had been balanced on his nightstand since 1987. "Well, why didn't you just say so? What's broken?" "Reality." "Come again." "Reality itself. It's breaking. The fundamental constants of the universe are becoming variables. Gravity can't decide which way is down. Time is flowing backwards in some places and sideways in others. We have reports of math not working correctly. 2 + 2 just equaled fish in the Andromeda sector. Randy rubbed his eyes. "And you want us to fix reality? You fixed our station with duct tape. You cured our archive's information collapse with a plunger. If anyone can fix reality, it's you and your team. It's gonna cost extra. We'll pay anything. I want season tickets to the Cowboys games. Good seats, not that nosebleed stuff. We can arrange that. Anything else? And Cletus wants one of them fancy alien food processors. His wife's birthday is coming up." "Just get here," Randy called the boys. They assembled in the shop within minutes, looking various degrees of awake and sober. "Boys," Randy announced, "we got ourselves a situation. Reality's broken." "Again?" Billy Joe asked. "Didn't we fix that last month?" No, that was just local reality around Mrs. Henderson's microwave. This is all reality. Oh, Cletus thought about it. We're gonna need more duct tape. They loaded up the truck with everything they could think of. Duct tape, 17 different types. WD-40, enough to lubricate a small moon. Various wrenches, including one that existed in 4 dimensions and was technically illegal in 12 galaxies. Baling wire, zip ties, super glue, a welding torch that Big Mike had improved until it could cut through time itself, and a cooler full of beer and sandwiches. "Don't forget Senor Quackers," Billy Joe reminded them, placing the rubber duck carefully on the dashboard. The alien ship that picked them up was different this time, bigger, sleeker, and piloted by someone who looked like anxiety had gained sentience and learned to sweat. "Thank the void you're here," the pilot exclaimed. "It's getting worse. The periodic table just became the occasional table. Chemistry only works sometimes now." "Sounds like a case of existential constipation," Cletus diagnosed, already pulling out tools that shouldn't exist. "Reality's all backed up. Probably needs a good flush." They arrived at what was supposed to be the Galactic Council's headquarters, but was now something that hurt to look at. The building existed and didn't exist simultaneously. It was every color and no color. It was exactly where it should be and 17 miles to the left of itself. "My eyes," Billy Joe complained. "It's like looking at a migraine having an argument with itself." "That's just dimensional flux," Randy said calmly, putting on sunglasses held together with duct tape and hope. "You get used to it." Inside, the situation was worse. The council chamber was experiencing what could only be described as a reality hiccup. Gravity pointed in 17 different directions. The past and future were having a fistfight in the corner. Mathematics had given up entirely and was crying in the bathroom. Chancellor Vox Heed rushed forward, his tentacles tied in knots that defied 3-dimensional space. "Thank goodness! The universe is unraveling. Our best scientists say we have maybe 6 hours before everything that exists doesn't." Randy surveyed the chaos with the calm of a man who'd once fixed a tornado with a socket wrench. "Well, there's your problem. You're trying to hold reality together. But reality's like a cat. The harder you try to control it, the more it fights back. So what do we do?" "First things first," Randy turned to his crew. "Billy Joe, I need you to find where reality first started breaking. Cletus, check the fundamental constants. See which ones are being stubborn. Big Mike." "Yeah?" "Go punch something important looking. Sometimes that helps." Big Mike cracked his knuckles and wandered off to find something that needed percussive maintenance. Billy Joe pulled out what looked like a metal detector held together with coat hangers and hope. He waved it around, following beeps only he could hear. The break started. "Here!" He pointed at what appeared to be empty space, but was actually a coffee maker. "The coffee maker?" Chancellor Vox Heed's voice reached pitches that shouldn't exist. "Reality is ending because of a coffee maker. Not just any coffee maker," Cletus said, examining it with technology that consisted mainly of squinting. "This here's a quantum coffee maker. Makes coffee that exists in all possible states until observed. Someone must have tried to make decaf. So, you never make decaf in a quantum coffee maker. The universe can't handle that level of paradox. Coffee that's not coffee in a machine that makes all possible coffees? That's like dividing by 0 while standing on your head and juggling antimatter. But how does that break reality?" Randy was already pulling panels off the coffee maker with the confidence of someone who'd fixed worse things with less information. "Everything's connected. You break one little thing, and if it's the right little thing at the wrong time, the whole system starts unraveling. Like that time Billy Joe sneezed and crashed the internet." "That was one time," Billy Joe protested, "and I was allergic to the quantum pollen." Inside the coffee maker, Randy found the problem. A single coffee ground existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously, vibrating at a frequency that made reality uncomfortable. "There you are, you little troublemaker." He reached in with pliers that shouldn't have been able to grip something that existed in multiple dimensions, but did anyway because Randy didn't know they couldn't. "Careful!" Chancellor Voxheed screamed. "One wrong move, and you could unravel existence itself." "Relax. I've done this before. Well, not this exactly, but something similar. Billy Joe, remember that time with the lawnmower? The one that achieved sentience, or the one that started eating time?" "The second one." "Oh yeah, we fixed that with rubber bands and positive thinking." Randy carefully extracted the offending coffee ground. Reality hiccuped, shuddered, and then started acting embarrassed about its behavior. But the damage was already done. Cracks in reality were spreading throughout the building, throughout the galaxy, throughout existence itself. "It's too late!" wailed the Chancellor. "Reality's still unraveling." "Not on my watch," Randy said, pulling out the most powerful tool in his arsenal, a roll of duct tape so old and powerful that light bent around it. "Boys, we're gonna tape reality back together." "You can't be serious," whispered someone. "Serious as a heart attack in a Baptist church. Cletus, you take the dimensional rifts on the left. Billy Joe, handle the temporal fractures. Big Mike, wham! Never mind. Big Mike's already started." They worked through the chaos with the methodical determination of people who'd once fixed a hurricane by turning it off and on again. Cletus taped dimensions together with such casual efficiency that physics textbooks would later dedicate entire chapters to not understanding how he did it. Billy Joe welded temporal fractures shut using a combination of superglue and what he called therapeutic swearing. Big Mike simply intimidated various aspects of reality until they behaved. But the real magic happened when Randy reached the core of the problem, the place where reality itself had torn, revealing the nothing that existed before something decided to exist. "Well, that ain't good," he muttered, staring into the void that stared back and seemed slightly embarrassed about the whole situation. "What do we do?" The Chancellor had given up on panic and moved straight to existential acceptance. Randy studied the tier in reality like a mechanic examining a particularly troublesome engine. Then he smiled. "Billy Joe, you still got that sandwich your wife made?" "The tuna one." "That's the one. Give it here." "But that's my lunch." "It's about to save the universe." Randy took the sandwich, a perfectly ordinary tuna sandwich with too much mayo and slightly stale bread, and threw it into the void. The void paused, confused. "What are you doing?" screamed approximately everyone. "Giving reality something to work with. See, the problem with nothing is that it ain't got no frame of reference, but you put something in nothing, and suddenly nothing's got to figure out what to do with something. And while it's distracted..." He started spraying WD-40 directly into the tear in reality, while Cletus applied duct tape with the speed and precision of a NASCAR pit crew. The void, still puzzled by the tuna sandwich, didn't notice it was being repaired until it was too late. Reality snapped back together, with a sound like the universe's largest rubber band being released. The coffee maker returned to making normal coffee that existed in only one dimension at a time. Gravity remembered which way was down. Mathematics sheepishly came out of the bathroom and apologized for its behavior. It worked. Chancellor Voxheed couldn't believe his 73 eyes. "Course it worked," Randy said, wiping his hands on his coveralls, leaving streaks of what appeared to be liquefied probability. "Reality's just like any other machine. Sometimes it needs a good kick, sometimes it needs some oil, and sometimes you just gotta confuse it into working right." "But the sandwich?" "Oh, that? Well, the void was expecting some complex solution, some mathematical formula or quantum manipulation. Last thing it expected was a tuna sandwich. Confused it long enough for us to patch things up. Plus," he grinned, "Billy Joe's wife makes terrible sandwiches. Even the void didn't want it." "Hey!" Billy Joe protested. The Galactic Council, once they'd recovered from their collective nervous breakdown, paid the humans handsomely. Randy got his cowboy's tickets, Cletus got his fancy food processor, Billy Joe got a new sandwich, and Big Mike got a medal for outstanding achievement in hitting things until they work. But as they were leaving, Chancellor Voxheed pulled Randy aside. "How?" he asked quietly. "How do you do it?" How do four humans with no advanced education consistently solve problems that the greatest minds in the galaxy can't? Randy thought about it for a moment, absent-mindedly patting Senor Quackers on his rubber head. You know what your problem is? You think too much. You got all these rules, all these laws of physics, all these things that can't be done. Us? We're too dumb to know what's impossible, so we just do it anyway. That's it? That's your secret? Well, that and duct tape. Duct tape fixes everything. As their rusty truck was loaded back onto the ship for the journey home, the universe settled into its newly repaired state. Oh sure, there were some lingering side effects. Tuesday was still purple, coffee occasionally remembered being 17-dimensional, and gravity sometimes got nostalgic and pointed the wrong way for a few seconds. But it worked. Reality was stable. The universe continued existing. And somewhere in the void between dimensions, a partially digested tuna sandwich floated, serving as a monument to humanity's greatest achievement. Saving reality through aggressive ignorance and a complete disregard for what should be possible. The ride home was quiet, each of the crew lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Billy Joe spoke up. "You reckon we'll ever run into something we can't fix?" Randy considered this, then shook his head. Nah. Soon as you start thinking something can't be fixed, that's when you've already lost. Everything can be fixed. You just got to be willing to try something stupid enough that it might just work. Like throwing a sandwich into the void? Exactly like throwing a sandwich into the void. Big Mike, who'd been silent the whole time, suddenly spoke. "Next time, we should bring pizza." "Why pizza?" "Everything likes pizza, even nothing." They all pondered this wisdom as Earth came into view, blue and perfect, and held together with the cosmic equivalent of duct tape and good intentions. 2 months later, Randy's phone rang again. He looked at the caller ID, another impossible number from another impossible place. Randy's Repair and Restoration. If we can't fix it, it probably shouldn't exist. "How can I help you?" "Mr. Randy. This is the Temporal Council. We have a problem. Next Thursday has gone missing, and we think it might be hiding in last Tuesday." Randy sighed, already reaching for his toolbox. "We're gonna need the good duct tape for this one." And so it went. The universe kept breaking in new and interesting ways, and 4 rednecks from Earth kept fixing it with solutions that made physics cry and reality question its life choices. They never did find out what happened to that tuna sandwich. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. But there was one job that would change everything. One problem that would push even their creative ignorance to its limits. The call came on a Friday, which should have been the first warning. Nothing good ever happened when aliens called on a Friday. "Randy." The voice was different this time, not panicked, not desperate, just tired. "This is Head Librarian Zix from the Infinite Archive. Your thing break again? I told you to change the reality fluid every 3,000 light years. "No, the archive is fine. Better than fine, actually. The chaos system you installed has become something of a tourist attraction. No, this is different." "Different how?" "God's broken." Randy nearly dropped his beer, which would have been a tragedy of cosmic proportions, since it was his last cold one. "Come again?" "Not God exactly, but the thing that makes the universe make sense. The fundamental observer, the cosmic consciousness, the thing that decides what's real and what isn't. It's malfunctioning. And you want us to fix God? We want you to fix whatever's broken. Things are getting weird, Randy. Weirder than Purple Tuesdays. Cats are acting like dogs. Dogs are solving calculus. And mathematics just filed for divorce from physics. Randy looked at his crew. Billy Joe was trying to teach a wrench to fetch. Cletus was having a staring contest with a light bulb. Big Mike was bench-pressing the truck because it was Friday. "We'll take the job." This time, the journey wasn't to a place, but to a concept. The ship flew beyond space, past time, through dimensions that didn't have names because naming them would make them too real. They finally arrived at something that wasn't quite a place, but wasn't quite not a place either. It looked like an office building designed by someone who'd only had reality described to them by a drunken philosopher. "This is it?" Billy Joe asked, staring at the building that hurt to perceive. "This is where God works?" "Not God," the pilot corrected nervously. "The fundamental observer, the consciousness that collapses probability into reality. Without it, everything exists and doesn't exist simultaneously." "So, Schrödinger's universe?" "Essentially, yes. Inside, they found chaos. Not the fun kind of chaos like when Big Mike decided to juggle chainsaws, but the existential kind. Office workers who existed in multiple states simultaneously were trying to file reports that were both complete and incomplete. The water cooler was dispensing coffee, tea, and existential dread in equal measure. And in the center of it all, in an office that was bigger on the inside than the outside, and occasionally wasn't there at all, sat the fundamental observer. It looked exactly like you'd expect, and nothing like you'd expect, simultaneously. It was every race and no race, every gender and no gender, every age and no age. It was basically having an identity crisis on a cosmic scale. "Oh, thank me you're here," it said with a voice like reality giving up. "I'm having a bit of a situation." "What kind of situation?" Randy asked, pulling out his tools with the confidence of someone who'd once fixed a black hole's self-esteem issues. "I've realized something terrible. I don't know what I'm doing." The observer clutched its head's probability cloud. "For eons, I've been collapsing quantum states into reality based on observation, but I just realized I've been guessing every choice, every collapsed probability, every moment of existence. I've just been winging it." "So?" Cletus shrugged. "We wing it all the time. Fixed a nuclear reactor last month by hitting it with a flip-flop." "But you're humans! You're supposed to not know what you're doing. I'm the fundamental observer. I'm the thing that makes reality real. And I've been using the cosmic equivalent of eeny, meeny, miny, mo to decide which timeline becomes true." The observer started showing them examples on screens that existed in more dimensions than was strictly necessary. "Look, the dinosaurs. That asteroid? I couldn't decide if it should hit or miss, so I flipped a coin. The creation of life? I sneezed on some primordial soup and went, yeah, that looks about right. Don't even get me started on platypuses. I was very tired that day." Randy studied the situation like he'd study a broken carburetor, with confidence that made no sense given the circumstances. "So you're having performance anxiety?" "I'm having existential terror. What if I've been doing it wrong this whole time? What if there's a right way to observe reality and I've just been improvising?" "Billy Joe," Randy said, "remember that time you fixed Mrs. Henderson's TV by dancing at it? Still don't know why that worked." "Exactly. Sometimes not knowing why something works is what makes it work. Big Mike, show the cosmic being your philosophy." Big Mike stood up, cracked his knuckles in a way that made space-time nervous and spoke, "Hit thing. Thing work or thing break. If thing break, hit different. Simple." "But that's barbaric," the observer protested. "It's honest," Randy countered. "Look, your problem ain't that you don't know what you're doing. Your problem is you just figured out you don't know what you're doing. There's a difference." "What difference?" Randy pulled out a beer from nowhere, a talent that quantum physicists would later spend decades failing to understand, and handed it to the observer. "The difference between unconscious incompetence and conscious incompetence. You've gone from stupid and happy to stupid and aware. It's uncomfortable, but it's progress." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No, but this might." Cletus had been examining the observer's workspace with tools that definitely violated several treaties. "You got a memory leak." "A what?" "Memory leak. You're remembering every possibility you didn't choose. Every timeline you collapsed, you're still partially aware of the ones you didn't. That's enough to drive anyone crazy. You're basically experiencing infinite FOMO. Fear of missing out on entire realities?" "Exactly. No wonder you're having a crisis." You need what we in the business call selective amnesia. Forget what didn't happen, focus on what did. But how? Billy Joe pulled out what looked like a toilet plunger that had been modified with parts from a particle accelerator. Same way we fix everything else, aggressively and with questionable methods. They got to work on the fundamental observer's consciousness with the same enthusiasm they'd applied to a clogged drain. Big Mike held down paradoxes while Randy applied metaphysical duct tape. Cletus rewired synapses that existed in theoretical space. Billy Joe used the plunger on memories that were backing up the observer's ability to make decisions. "This is insane," the observer protested while they worked. "You're treating the fundamental consciousness of reality like it's a broken washing machine. If it spins and needs fixing, it's basically a washing machine," Randy explained, applying WD-40 to thoughts that had gotten stuck. The universe, a washing machine, the concept of observation itself, they're all just systems that sometimes need a good whack. But what if you break something important? Then we'll fix that too. "Billy Joe, hand me the thing." "Which thing?" "The thing we don't talk about." "Oh, the thing. Billy Joe handed over something that looked like a wrench had mated with a philosophy textbook, and their offspring had been raised by electrical tape. Randy used it to adjust something in the observer's consciousness that made everyone's teeth itch. "What are you doing?" "Installing a confidence subroutine. See, your problem is you're thinking too much about thinking. You need to get back to just doing. Like riding a bike. The moment you start thinking about how you're balancing, you fall over. I don't know how to ride a bike. I'm a cosmic entity." "Even worse. Cletus, give it the thing." Cletus pulled out senior quackers and placed the rubber duck on what might have been the observer's desk, or possibly just a probability of furniture. "What's this?" "Rubber duck debugging. When you're unsure about a decision, explain it to the duck. If it sounds stupid when you say it out loud to a rubber duck, it's probably stupid. But it's a duck. Best supervisor we ever had," Big Mike rumbled. "Don't question the duck." The observer stared at Senor Quackers. Senor Quackers stared back with the confidence of an inanimate object that had somehow become middle management. "This is absurd. I'm the consciousness that decides reality, and you're telling me to consult a rubber duck." "Has it ever been wrong?" Randy asked. "It's never been anything. It's a duck." "Exactly. Perfect record." They continued working through what the observer called its existential infrastructure. They found decades of backed-up decisions, centuries of second-guessing, and eons of imposter syndrome accumulated in what Cletus described as the worst case of cosmic constipation I've ever seen. "Ooh, when's the last time you made a decision you were happy with?" Billy Joe asked, using something that looked like a stethoscope to listen to thoughts. "The creation of hydrogen, simple, elegant. One proton, one electron. After that, everything got complicated." "So go back to basics," Randy suggested. "Stop trying to make perfect decisions. Just make decisions. Perfect is the enemy of good enough." "But what if I choose wrong? What if I collapse the wrong probability?" Then the universe gets interesting. You ever notice how the best stories come from mistakes? That asteroid that killed the dinosaurs? Led to mammals and eventually to us? Was it the right decision? Who knows? But it sure made things interesting. The observer considered this, its form flickering through various states of uncertainty. "But the responsibility is imaginary," Big Mike said flatly. "You're not responsible for making the right choice. You're responsible for making a choice. Big difference." They worked for what felt like hours, but was actually happening outside of time, so it was simultaneously instant and eternal. They cleared the backed-up decisions, installed what Randy called executive function lubricant, and even gave the observer's doubt a proper outlet, a small notebook labeled "Things That Might Have Been But Weren't," and that's okay. Finally, they stood back to admire their work. The observer looked different. Not more certain, but more comfortable with uncertainty. "I still don't know what I'm doing," it admitted. "Good," Randy said. "Now you're just like the rest of us. The only difference is you're doing it on a cosmic scale, but the principle's the same. Fake it till you make it. That's terrifying. That's life, or existence, or whatever you want to call it. And the observer stood up, or achieved a state that was standing adjacent, and looked around its office. Reality had stabilized. The cats were being cats again. Dogs had forgotten how to do calculus, and mathematics and physics had agreed to couples counseling. You fixed me by making me accept that I'm broken. You ain't broken, Cletus corrected. You're just improvising. The whole universe is improvising. Atoms are improvising. Gravity's improvising. Hell, time's just making it up as it goes along. You're in good company. Besides, Billy Joe added, you've been doing this for billions of years, and reality hasn't completely collapsed yet. That's a pretty good track record for someone who doesn't know what they're doing. The observer paid them in something that wasn't quite money, but could be exchanged for goods and services if you didn't think about it too hard. Randy negotiated for season tickets to games that hadn't been played yet. Cletus got a food processor that existed in 7 dimensions. Billy Joe got a sandwich that was always fresh. And Big Mike got a medal for services to reality despite not understanding it. As they were leaving, the observer called out, "What if I mess up again? What if I have another crisis?" Randy turned back, grinning. "Then you call us. We'll fix you up again. Might use different duct tape next time, though. Keep things interesting. You really think reality can be held together with duct tape and confidence? Been working so far, hasn't it?" They left the observer there, sitting at its desk that existed and didn't exist, making decisions with the help of a rubber duck, and somehow that felt exactly right. On the trip home, Billy Joe asked the question they were all thinking. Did we just fix God with percussive maintenance and a rubber duck? "Nah," Randy said. "We just reminded it that nobody knows what they're doing. Even God's just making it up as they go along. That's either really comforting or really terrifying." "Both," Big Mike said. "Both is good." When they got back to Earth, they found things had changed slightly. Reality, now being observed by an entity that had embraced its own uncertainty, was a little more flexible. Machines occasionally fixed themselves out of embarrassment. Probability sometimes took suggestions. Tuesdays were still purple, but now they were purple with confidence. Randy's repair shop got a new sign. Randy's Repair and Restoration. We fixed reality, and all we got was this lousy sign. Business was good. The universe kept breaking in new and creative ways, and 4 rednecks from Earth kept fixing it with solutions that made sense to nobody, including themselves. But the biggest change came when other civilizations started learning from their methods. The Galactic Engineering Academy introduced a course called Applied Ignorance. The Quantum Institute started teaching aggressive problem solving. There was even a best-selling book, The Duct Tape Method, How to Fix Anything by Not Knowing It's Impossible. Randy read parts of it once. "They're overthinking it," he concluded, and went back to fixing a lawnmower that had accidentally achieved enlightenment. The truth was simple. The universe wasn't held together by laws and constants and fundamental forces. It was held together by duct tape, WD-40, and the stubborn refusal of one species to accept that anything was truly unfixable. And somewhere in the space between spaces, the fundamental observer sat at its desk, consulting with Senor Quackers about whether to collapse a probability into reality. "What do you think, Duck? Should this particle spin up or down?" Senor Quackers, being a rubber duck, said nothing. "You're right," the observer decided. "Let's make it both and see what happens." Reality hiccuped, adjusted, and continued existing, held together by cosmic duct tape and the universe's most powerful force, the confidence of people who don't know what they're doing but do it anyway. 3 years passed. Randy's crew had fixed everything from a pulsar with depression to a galaxy that had forgotten how to rotate. They'd become legends, myths, the subject of doctoral dissertations that always concluded with, "We don't understand how this works, but it does." Then came the final call, the one they'd all been dreading, but somehow expecting. It wasn't from the Galactic Council or the Temporal Authority, or even the Fundamental Observer. It was from Earth, specifically from Mrs. Henderson. "Randy, my microwave's making that noise again." Randy looked at his crew. They looked back. They all knew what this meant. Mrs. Henderson's microwave wasn't just any appliance. It was the microwave that had started it all, the one that had first torn a hole in dimensions, the one that had taught them that reality was more flexible than anyone thought. And if it was acting up again. "We'll be right over, Mrs. Henderson." They drove to her house in Bessie, the truck that had been to space so many times it had its own frequent flyer miles in 17 dimensions. Mrs. Henderson, 93 years old and tougher than quantum steel, was waiting on her porch. "It's in there," she said, pointing to her kitchen, making the strangest noise, like the universe is clearing its throat. They entered the kitchen and found the microwave doing something that microwaves definitely shouldn't do, existing in a state of pure possibility. "Well," Billy Joe said, "that ain't good." The microwave was every microwave that had ever existed and would ever exist. It was heating everything and nothing. It was simultaneously new, broken, and hadn't been invented yet. "It's beautiful," Cletus whispered. "It's impossible," Randy corrected, "which means we can fix it." They approached the microwave with the reverence of people approaching something that could either make popcorn or unmake existence. Big Mike cracked his knuckles, ready to apply percussive maintenance if necessary. But then the microwave spoke. Not with words, but with meaning. It communicated directly with their understanding, bypassing language entirely. It was tired. It had been the first crack in reality's rigid structure, the first proof that the impossible was just another word for "haven't tried hard enough yet." And now, after years of holding that crack open, of being the gateway between what is and what could be, it was ready to rest. But if it stopped, if it finally became just a normal microwave, the crack would close. The universe would go back to being rigid, inflexible, bound by laws that couldn't be broken with duct tape and determination. "So what do we do?" Billy Joe asked. Randy thought about it, really thought about it, which was unusual and slightly concerning. Then he smiled. "We don't fix it." "What?" everyone said simultaneously, including Mrs. Henderson. "We don't fix it," Randy repeated. "We promote it." He pulled out Senor Quackers and placed the rubber duck inside the microwave. Then he took out his roll of ancient duct tape, the one that had fixed dimensions and reality and God itself, and began wrapping the microwave not to repair it, but to preserve it. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Making a monument. This here microwave is the reason the universe learned to be flexible. It's the reason we can fix impossible things. It deserves better than being fixed." They spent the next hour turning Mrs. Henderson's microwave into something more. They added parts from their truck, bits of alien technology they'd collected, drops of WD-40 that had lubricated the gears of reality itself. When they were done, the microwave still existed in all states simultaneously. But now it did it with purpose. It became a beacon, a reminder that the universe was held together not by laws, but by the willingness to try something stupid and see if it worked. "It's perfect," Mrs. Henderson said, even though her microwave was now occasionally heating food from next week and last year, simultaneously. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing," Randy said. "This one's on us. Payment for all the times we've used your microwave as an excuse to fix the universe." As they left, the microwave pulsed with a warm light that existed in spectrums that hadn't been discovered yet. It was no longer just an appliance. It was a symbol, a reminder. The news spread across the galaxy. The microwave that had started it all had become something more. Pilgrims from distant stars came to see it, to understand how 4 humans with no understanding of physics had changed the nature of reality itself. The Galactic Council erected a plaque. "This microwave broke the universe in exactly the right way." The Temporal Authority added, "Temporal paradoxes resolved by ignoring them since 2024. The Fundamental Observer simply wrote, "Thanks for the duck." and life went on. The universe continued to break in new and interesting ways. Randy and his crew continued to fix them with solutions that shouldn't work, but did. Because that was the real secret. The universe wasn't meant to make sense. It was meant to keep going, held together by duct tape and determination, by people too stubborn to know what was impossible. One day, a young alien engineer asked Randy, "What's the secret? How do you fix things that can't be fixed?" Randy looked at the alien, then at his crew, Billy Joe teaching a wrench to play poker, Cletus licking a battery to see if it was quantum, Big Mike bench-pressing reality because it was Tuesday, still purple, and smiled. The secret? There ain't no secret. You just gotta be willing to try something so stupid that the universe itself goes, "Well, I didn't expect that," and lets you get away with it. That's it. That and duct tape. Always bring duct tape. The alien left, confused but oddly inspired. And somewhere in the space between what is and what could be, Mrs. Henderson's microwave continued to exist in all states simultaneously, warming the hearts of those who understood that the best solutions were the ones that made no sense at all. Years turned into decades. Randy's crew became old, but not retired. Retirement was for people who knew when to quit, and they'd never learned that lesson. They'd fixed everything from quarks that had gotten too small to galaxies that had gotten too big. They taught the universe that rules were more like suggestions and that any problem could be solved with enough duct tape and a complete disregard for what should be possible. And then, one day, Randy got a call that wasn't a call. It came through dimensions that didn't have phones, from a place that wasn't quite a place. It was the universe itself. "I need your help," it said, with a voice like existence admitting defeat. "What's wrong?" Randy asked, not even surprised anymore that the universe could call him. "I've realized something terrible. I make sense." Randy nearly dropped his beer. "Come again?" "All your fixes, all your impossible solutions, they've become possible. You've broken the universe so many times and fixed it so many ways that there are no rules anymore. Everything works. Nothing is impossible. I've become predictable in my unpredictability. And that's bad. It's boring. Do you have any idea how tedious existence is when everything is possible? There's no challenge, no surprise, no point. I need you to do something that even you can't do." Randy looked at his crew, all of them listening in on the impossible phone call. "You want us to fail. I want you to try something so impossible that even your method of making the impossible possible can't make it possible. That's a lot of possibles. I'm desperate." Randy thought about it. Really, truly thought about it. Then he had an idea so stupid that even he was impressed by its stupidity. "Boys," he said, "we're gonna fix the universe by breaking our ability to fix things." "How?" Billy Joe asked. "We're gonna follow the instructions." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the universe itself gasped. "You don't mean—" Cletus whispered. "Yep, we're gonna read the manual." What followed was the hardest thing Randy's crew had ever done. They found the manual, the actual original manual for the universe, written in languages that predated language, in dimensions that existed before dimensions were cool. And they followed it. They followed every rule, every guideline, every warning. They used the right tools for the right jobs. They measured twice, cut once. They didn't use duct tape even once. The universe watched in horror and fascination as they worked. They were fixing things correctly, using proper procedures, following safety protocols. It was wrong. It was unnatural. It was exactly what the universe needed. Because by following the rules, Randy and his crew created a paradox. They were people who fixed things by not knowing what was impossible, trying to fix things by doing what was possible. It was like dividing by zero, while zero was dividing by itself. Reality hiccuped, then it laughed, actually laughed, a sound like supernovas telling dad jokes. "You did it!" the universe exclaimed. "You created something I can't predict. A paradox of competence." "Did we fix you?" Randy asked, confused, because he'd actually understood the manual, which was itself impossible. No, you made me more broken, and it's wonderful. Now there are things that are impossible even for you, which makes them possible, because you make impossible things possible, which makes them impossible again, which... The universe trailed off into happy confusion, caught in a loop of possibility and impossibility that would keep it entertained for eons. "So, we're done?" Billy Joe asked. "Never," the universe replied cheerfully. "Now things can break in ways that even you can't fix, which means you'll have to find new ways to fix them, which means I'll never be bored again." And that's how 4 rednecks from Earth saved the universe by following instructions, created the field of paradoxical engineering, and ensured that reality would always need someone willing to hit it with a wrench and see what happened. They went back to their shop, where Mrs. Henderson's microwave still existed in all states simultaneously, where Senor Quacker's supervised repairs that shouldn't work but did, where duct tape held together not just machines, but the very concept of possibility itself. "You know," Cletus said, "I still don't understand what we just did." "Good," Randy replied, cracking open a beer that existed in 12 dimensions and tasted like victory. "The day we understand what we're doing is the day we stop being able to do it. And somewhere in the vast expanse of existence, Tuesday turned a slightly different shade of purple, just to keep things interesting. The universe had learned the most important lesson of all. It's not about making sense. It's about making do. And as long as there were things that could break, there would be 4 rednecks with duct tape ready to fix them in ways that would make physics weep and reality reconsider its life choices." The phone rang. Randy